Hey, Book Dragons! It is your girl Lindsay with another episode of the Spine Bookcast, Chronicles of a Bookshop. So, how's it going? How's everybody doing? Welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in. So today I have one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, and I know that I say that every week, but I really do mean it. I've got Lia Trigg, who is owner of some of the best baked goods that you'll ever eat in your whole life. And she is one of my book club members at the Spine. And hey, Leah, how's it going?
It's going good, Lindsay. How about you?
I'm good. So let's just get into it. How did you get into reading?
You know what? In school, when I was younger, which was a long time ago, we had to do book reports. And like you had to do like 10 book reports, I think, every quarter or every semester. So that was starting in elementary school, and we would have to read a book, and then we'd have to stand in front of the class and give a book report.
I hated standing in front of the class and giving a book report. And my problem was that a book report for me. Well, so on page 45, so and so and so and so were having a conversation, and this is what they talked about. And then on page 68, I don't know how to summarize a book because everything's important to
What
me.
you do, you probably didn't back then, but you do now.
Yes, I have gotten much better at summarizing a book now because people would do that motion with their hand, or they're like, yes, come on with it. I'm like, no, but all this stuff is important.
But that's exactly how you learn to, you know, give information.
Right,
You
right,
learn through
right.
that type of interaction.
Yes. So, what was your favorite book as a kid?
You know what? I don't know that I loved reading Nancy Drew.
Oh, yeah,
So my mom would get us all the books.
sure.
And but back then, I think my favorite author was like Judy Blume.
Oh,
Remember, I don't know if you read it, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
yes. Yes, I
And
love
she
that book.
was getting ready to start her cycle, like she was entering puberty. I think that was because that's the age I was, and she was
Yeah.
kind of awkward. And I think that book kind of helped me navigate being awkward and getting ready to go into puberty. So I loved all of Judy Blume's books.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure, for sure. I I loved when I was little, I loved things like see now I can think of it, A Wrinkle in Time and
Okay.
Where the Red Fern Grows and Lord of the Rings and Shakespeare. I was such a cerebral little kid when it came to books. But then I'd also read things like Flowers in the Attic. So,
Right.
like, it's such a weird thing. Like, I think our generation, whatever Generation X, is that what they call us? I think that we had such a weird selection of books to choose from.
Yeah, I would agree because I did. It's as crazy as it sounds. I like The Giver.
I love that book.
Yes, I still like it. And
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know why. I think it was because you tried to make a perfect world by taking away the things that you thought made it bad,
Hmm.
and you just made it worse.
Hmm. Hmm. Oh yeah.
And for him, and I'm thinking, wait, the baby's not perfect, and so now you're going to dispose of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just that whole, I don't. It's the weirdest thing that I even like that book, but it's one of the books I remember.
Oh yeah. Well, so I remember when I read the first, so I loved books, right? But I never had one like until I read To Kill a Mockingbird, that like I finished it and
Yeah,
then sat there and had a just visceral reaction to the ending, and so I remember
yeah,
so angry. And I think I would like ninth grade, so you're what, 14, 15, something like that in ninth grade. And I remember sitting there
yeah.
going, what the fuck? And just What? How? Oh my God. And just
Right.
raged at the fact that after everything that Atticus Finch said, and that whole town knew that the guy was innocent. They all knew it. But because of his skin color, just the injustice of it made me so angry. And then our teacher showed us the movie with Gregory Peck. And I remember bawling my eyes out because I was just so angry. But at the same time, watching Gregory Peck play Atticus Finch and watching him rail against the injustice was just beautiful. And I remember that was the first time I ever had a
Yeah.
book that just, ugh, you know.
But I think that's the power of writing. And that's why I think people get so up in arms sometimes, because it good writing speaks to you. Like,
Yes.
it says something to you. And I think people get intimidated by that sometimes. Um, and so they just get all bent out of shape about it.
They really
But
do.
for me it was important to see representation, to see characters like myself. Even as my daughters were growing up, it was important
Well, and I think
because
too,
you feel seen.
yeah, and I think representation is so important. Like you and I were talking earlier, and I talked to you about John Green's book, Turtles All the Way Down. Sometimes I think
Yeah,
books give us the words to describe something or to explain our feelings about something that we previously don't have. So, like when I got diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and I was trying to explain to my husband how my thoughts would just whirlpool out and get completely out of control and wind me up into a panic attack, I was struggling for the words to try to explain how irrational I know this is, but yet my brain still tells me I need to panic, right? And then John Green's book
right,
goes all the way down, like the first chapter, the girl is talking about her thought spirals, and it was just like, oh my God, that right there is what my brain does. It's not just me. Somebody else knows what this is. And I remember running to my
right.
husband and be like, you have to read this chapter right. You got to read this paragraph right now. This is what my brain does. This right here is what I've been trying to tell you. And had I not read that book, I never would have had that moment where I could explain to my husband all these ridiculous panic things that you see me having. This is why. This is what my brain does. And I
Yeah,
know that there are other people out in the world that have that representation, and it made me feel so much less alone.
yep. And I think books introduce us to what we might not see. Like
Yeah.
I'm from Michigan, and in Michigan we don't have mountains. You know what I mean? So if
Mm-hmm.
you're in Michigan and you don't go outside of that state, sometimes you have an opportunity to read a book, see a world that you might not have known existed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I think it's UT would have a summer reading program, and I remember Nick being in it, and this book, and I cannot remember the title, but the young man was trying to climb a mountain. I would have never known what a mountain was, to see one
That's
until
never
I
even
moved here to
occurred to me.
Tennessee. And now, what'd you say?
That's never even occurred to me that that would have been something that somebody would have struggled with not knowing what a mountain looks like. And see, that's my point. I didn't know that. I didn't know that that's what that would have been like for someone up north. Never
Right, because
occurred to me.
mountains would not be. A book is a book, or a TV or a magazine is where you are going to see one, because you're not going to see one in your neighborhood.
No,
You're just
yeah,
not going to see that.
didn't even
So
occur
in
to
the
me.
story, the young man he was going to climb a mountain, and the gist of the story was we all have mountains that we have to climb,
Sure.
adversity that we experience. And so for me, just reading along with her, I thought, man, I would never have an opportunity to climb a mountain. I mean, I could now, but
Yeah.
it's not something that I would normally be doing. So books sometimes give us access to places that we might not ever go.
See, and like you
And so
say
now I get to,
mountains. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
So you have the mountains, right? For me, something like that for me was like the Harlem Renaissance. So like Langston Hughes and Selma Burke and Palmer Hayden and Aaron Douglas and that whole art movement and the writers movement and that kind of stuff. It gave me a different view of life from a non-white Southern perspective to hear and read all of these writers and view all this artwork by this group of people that I've never met, that I've never seen before, being able to read those, those books and having those poets, it opens your brain to be like, oh, I didn't know that existed. Like Zora Neale Hurston,
Right.
I can't even express how much I love her books. And Langston Hughes, oh my God, and W.E. Du Bois. And,
Yep.
I read some of their stuff and James Baldwin. James Baldwin. I wish I could see my
And
face.
see, those are required readings. We were
Yeah,
required to read that at Fisk
yeah,
University. But of course, that makes sense because it's a historically black college.
yeah,
Those are required readings.
yeah.
Um, and we
And
had
see,
to read
they
those
weren't for
like that
me.
was summer reading.
They were not for me. And then so I remember my English teacher who I'm still friends with. Um, she would have these assigned books, and I'd be like, I don't want to read this. This is boring. We've already read something like this. God, can't we read something else? So she started giving me books like Langston Hughes and Toni Morrison and that kind of stuff. And it was like, okay, this is a culture I do not have exposure to. This is what I want to read. This is the kind of stuff that I want exposure to. I want something other than what I see every day.
Yeah, and I think it gives you because like some things you're like, oh wait, does that exist? What?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I
yeah,
think it opens our mind up to other places. Like
yep,
we're like, oh man, does that really exist?
yep,
Oh wow. And so
yep,
I just think books allow you to go to another place.
yes.
It opens up worlds to you. You know what I
Yep.
mean? That you might not have access to.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too that I think books are also I think books are supposed to evoke an emotional reaction. I think
Yes, I
books are
agree.
supposed to make you sad or happy or angry, or books are
Or
supposed to make
scared.
you, or yes, books are
What?
supposed to make you
Lloyd,
do Lloyd Elmore Jr.
he tries to scare me every time.
I know. He's right up there with
He
Stephen King in that he can write something that gives me the willies. Like when
absolutely.
what was the one that he wrote and it was not the spaces between spaces, but it was the other one. Um,
Fracture spaces?
that's the one. And
I can't. The
that
first
first
one,
story, holy crap.
he 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 loves to scare me. And he's not
He,
even like it's it's not horror, like not like
yeah.
grotesque horror, but it's still horror nonetheless. And he
It
scares
is
me
in
every
that
time.
realm of what I call taking something totally normal, like a weather balloon or
Yes,
an angel statue
yes,
or a dog. Thank you, Stephen King.
yes,
Or a car. And how can we make this
yes.
frightening? And then doing it so that for the rest
Right.
of your life, whenever you pass an angel statue, you kind of make sure you don't not stare at it. Or when you look at a dog and it growls at you, you kind of go, have you been around bats lately? Have you been in a cave? Or a weather balloon, like, how'd that get up there? And I love
Yeah,
that books can do that. Pet Cemetery, for God's
yes,
sake.
and I'm like,
Every time I look at a
and
Pet
I think,
Cemetery now, it's like, nope, I'm good. Thank you.
and they make you, sometimes the writer makes you say, huh, never saw it that way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, what was the one where they went out of space? The uh, the husband and wife.
Are you talking about Dan's book?
They're for, yes, and so the way he, did the rocket and the trajectory, he had people actually going and like looking at, is that possible? I
Hmm.
think Charles went and looked up to see if it was actually possible.
Yeah,
I'm like,
he
that's some
did.
good writing. Good
Yes.
writing.
It's like when the Da Vinci Code, what's that guy's name? I can't remember I'm gonna look it up. The guy who wrote the Da Vinci Code, right? So when that came out,
Yes, yes.
I have seen all of those movies, or all of those paintings that he talks about. I've seen every single one. And when you Dan Brown, that's it. So when he talks about like the Mona Lisa and he talks about the backgrounds and how one is higher than the other and like what some of these things mean in the paintings, I'll be damned if I didn't go find the biggest book of paintings by Da Vinci and look at all this stuff and reread those chapters or that section and then look at the picture. And I'll be damned if I didn't sit there and have the moments of, damn. Never looked at it that way. And I've seen the
Yep.
Lisa in public. Like I have seen it in the Louvre, but I remember looking at that going, son of a bitch. That's brilliant.
Yep, because remember, um, I can't. He wrote the book Frostbitten.
Yeah. Oh no, so Frostbite, are you
When
talking
you,
that's the one written by Dietrich Stogner.
yeah, so one, yeah, this, and so the way I think there was some type of bird that he had in his story, and we
Hmm.
were like, can a bird really exist in that climate? And because I'm like, okay, that's not even real. Can a
Yeah.
bird really exist in that climate? And he actually did the research, and he was like, yes, this can
Which
really
I
happen.
just
I was
think is
like, what?
amazing. I just think that's amazing that your brain, like, I wonder what kind of animal can survive in the frozen tundra and could be a bird. And if it is a bird, what does that survival look like? Like,
Right.
that blows
And
my
that
mind.
the writer actually understands that they have to make the story believable.
Yeah.
That he took the time to do the research and he understood, yeah, somebody's probably going to check this out.
Well, and
And he
so,
incorporated that into his story.
right. Well, and so like I read Where the Crawdad Sings, because I had several people that just raved about that book, and I was like, okay. Now I love South Carolina and North Carolina. I love the Carolinas so much. I've been there to both places. And I thought I loved them until I read Where the Crawdads Sing, and it made me fall all kinds of in love all over again. Because the way that she describes the swamps and this and the coastline and all of that, I could see it, and it made me want to go there, and it made me want to see all the animals that she talked about. And it was such a beautiful love language about nature and land and the main
Yeah.
character's love of where her home was. It was just, and I mean, that aside, the story is really good, but the descriptions of this place made me fall all in love with it all over again because it was just like, yeah, that's exactly what it looks like.
And I think that's the power of books, and that's
Yeah.
probably why some people get so worked up about it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I think our words, whether they're written or spoken, they have power,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't know. We don't always understand the power that we wield. And I'm just like, I think you let me read that, is it The House on the Cerulean Sea?
Yes. I love that book. It is so beautiful.
And right, I loved it, and you could like almost feel the it almost seems like the main character's world, his home life is black and white. It's just
Mm-hmm.
so boring and every day it's the same thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
for the first time, he gets to see, he had never seen the ocean, like the sea.
Mm-hmm.
He had never experienced it.
Yeah.
And then he did. And then the characters are so well written,
Oh,
and the
right.
little gnome, she's a teenager, but she's old
Oh
and she's
my
always wanted to hit
God.
somebody in the head with a shovel. Like it's
And
just the
Lucifer
funniest
or Lucy.
thing to me.
Lucy was
Yes,
hilarious.
yes, yes. And
Well, I
I
mean,
think
they
it
did that
just
with Wizard of
was
Oz.
enter-
When Dorothy's in Kansas is in black and white, and then when she gets to Oz, everything is hypercolor. And it's just really cool
right,
to see that kind of switch.
right, right. And it just book writing just to me is just amazing because Sydney has let me read it's fairy tales and folklores or something like that. And I
Oh,
just
yeah. Is
found it
that that
interesting that
book
there
with
are
the
different.
wolf on the front?
No, it's a. I think it's it's an apple. A lady is biting an apple or something like that. I have to
Oh,
look,
yeah,
go
yeah,
back
yeah. I
at
know
it.
which one you're
But
talking
it's
about. Yeah.
got like the very first story is Little Red Riding Hood, and it's
Hmm.
all the versions
Hmm.
that were written of Little Red Riding Hood. And I just look at how writers can take a story
Hmm.
and put their spin on it.
Yeah. So when
Like
I was
it's
in
just to
college,
me,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just always find it amazing that writers can take a story, like even the children, like the Three Little Pigs.
Yeah.
There's a children's version where the wolf tells his side of the,
Oh, yeah. No, I've seen that
and
version.
I think
It's
that's
funny.
yeah, I think it's just the coolest thing. So to me, you can take books in all kind of directions and give all kind of lessons. Like it's just amazing to me.
Well, and so like when I was in college, I took a 3 semester course where it was like children's literature, adolescence literature, and young adult literature. And then at the end
Yep,
of the course, you had to either write a paper, like a 20 to 30 page paper
yep,
on a children's illustrator, or pick a story and talk about how different cultures have, like talk about that particular story. So because, if you know me at all, I'm a Sleeping Beauty girl, like all the way through and through. So I chose Sleeping Beauty. So I got to experience putting on white gloves and seeing a book at MTSU's library that I had to like put on white gloves and t turn the pages with like special tongs because the pages were so delicate, and it was one of the original Sleeping Beauty like German folktale
yeah,
stories. And then I did research
yeah.
and I found out there's a Japanese version of Sleeping Beauty that's a horror story. There is Mexican,
Right.
yeah, I mean, there's a Mexican is from Mexico City that is a love story of great loss. There are probably
Yeah.
25 different versions from all these different countries.
Right.
All of them had this whole folklore cultural spin. Some of them were love stories. Some of them were war stories like Mulan. Some of them were ghost stories like in, Japan. And it was just, you have this one idea of a sleeping woman, and it can either be terrifying or hilarious. Like there's one called Sleeping Ugly, and it's for kids, and it's about, beauty isn't as important as kindness. But some of the books
Right.
are amazing. And just this, and I read every single one of them. I sure did. I read every single one. And I remember
Yeah.
I sat there and wrote notes, and I wrote what the title was, who wrote it, what year it was done, what country it represented, because I didn't want to read one from the same country. So I wanted to make sure that I read different countries. So every book that I read was from a different country so that I could explore how this one story, across all these different cultures,
Yeah.
the same kind of story. And it was one of the best lessons for me on world culture and how, yes, we're separated by oceans and mountains and color and, sex and all this kind of stuff. But when it comes down to it, we still can tell a real good story.
Yes. Yeah, because I did have a class when I was in college, because that's my minor was in English, and
Mm.
we had to read several children's books, then and adult books, like remember the short, like I love short stories because
Oh, me too.
the investment to me is not as long.
Sure.
Good old country folk. And then what's the one where the salesman tricked the girl out of her leg? Do
Oh,
you remember that?
yes.
He was a encyclopedia salesman, I think,
Yeah.
and he
Think of
had her
that
thinking
like
he was
at
in
3
love with
o'clock in the
her.
morning, it'll hit me what the title of that is. I'm gonna text you like, it's
Right,
blah, blah, blah.
right. And I was just like, who writes this? It's just, and
Yeah.
you know what? The yellow wallpaper was the first
Oh my
time I had read a
gosh.
story
Yes.
about mental illness.
Yes.
It
Well,
was the
okay.
first
Mental
time I
illness.
ever,
Kafka wrote the Metamorphosis, where his main character turns into a cockroach. And if that's not a
oh,
story about
yes,
mental illness, I don't know what is.
yes. And I was like, this is the first time I'm reading about, that was my first time reading about mental illness, and
Mhm.
and understanding, wow, this is real. You know what I mean? And so I just was just like, man, even all the money in the world didn't, like, because
Mm-hmm.
they had money,
Yeah.
but at that time, in that time period, they still didn't have cures or understand
Right.
it as much, and so it just
First book
gave
that
me a
I ever read
whole
about
new.
mental illness was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I just remember being
Right.
so sad at the main characters, what happens to him at the end, because instead of treating him, they just butchered him, you know? And
Yeah.
I
And
remember thinking, y'all couldn't have taken 2 minutes to try and evaluate what was happening. Y'all just made him easier to be complied with.
yeah, but think about how they used to treat mental illness
Oh my
and
God, right?
what they would do to people because they didn't understand.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, I think writing helps us to see things that we might not. We're going to see everything in our entire. You know what I mean? You're not going to
Yeah,
experience the entire world in your lifetime. I think
yeah.
books help you go outside of yourself, experience.
Well, and think about it too.
It's sometimes
You've got different cultures, right? And
right.
there's a lot of books and I'm going to say something really controversial, but like, just hang tight with me to get to my point. Black people, there's
Okay.
a lot of books that paint the African American community as either drug dealers, gangbangers, incarcerated inmates, uneducated, all those stereotype crap, right? But then you
Right.
have books by people like Tommy Adeyemi. And I don't know if you've read any of her books, but there are books out there just, I think, in the last 10 years, that are anti-stereotype. Um,
Right.
they're positive, positive books, and they show African American people. So like Hair Love is one of those. Um,
Right.
Skin Like Mine. You Should See Me in a Crown. Um, oh, let's see what else. There is Black Enough, and it's that one is one of my favorites because Black Enough is stories about being young and black in America, and it's not so much a stereotype, but it shines a light on stories of black people that are not stereotypes. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Stuff like so, like instead of reading Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn, which no shade to Mark Twain, I love Mark Twain. You know what I mean? Like I love Mark Twain, but that
Right.
is the only thing that he wrote. American Born Chinese, that's another good one. Because they show the hate you give. Holy shit, that book is amazing. And you look at
But
these
I think
books that show people in a different light that are not stereotypical. And I love that books that you have writers that can do that. They'd be like, no, 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 we're not going to talk about this. Let's show African American people and Asian people and Hispanic people as doctors and leaders and brilliant scientists and, you know, businessmen that run million-dollar corporations. Like there was an article in some magazine, it may have been Ebony, I can't remember, but it had Ice Cube, Ice-T, and Dr. Dre, I think, were the three people because they were all musicians. And it had all three of them dressed up in like three-piece suits, which fly as hell. Thank you very much. Y'all look amazing. I'm here for it. And it talked about how all three of them came up from these similar backgrounds, but were now CEOs of multi-million dollar music corporations and were giving back to their community. And it just wrote about all these amazingly wonderful things that they did instead of focusing on their background. They were like, this is what these people are doing to help their people. And I just love that
right.
because it was just
But
like
I think
how
that
you write.
but I think I think we want our young people to grow up to be writers. I think
Yeah.
in every culture you need to have representation. And
Oh,
so that
absolutely.
means people have to want to write about their cultures. They
Hmm.
have to want to write about those things. And so I mean I love a good inspirational story where somebody comes from this to
Hmm.
become this.
Hmm.
And we still see in movies now, it's not as prevalent. You still see in movies where there are stereotypes. You still see the people being the drug dealers, the pimps. You
Hmm.
still see that, but we're starting to see more positive
Yeah.
images of minorities.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think that means writers, up and coming writers, have to choose to write from that perspective. But look at the news.
Yeah.
How many um, stories on the news are positive? I think people thrive off of negative. They thrive off of that for
It's
whatever
really
reason.
toxic. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know why that is. I'm thinking, can't we write
What's
from
the
a positive
tagline?
perspective?
If it bleeds, it leads, I think is the press tagline, which I think is barbaric.
Yeah, right. But I don't know why like that. Maybe we think it makes us look better. It makes our lives better
Yeah.
if when we see that stuff. And I'm thinking it brings me down. I like
Yeah.
to I like entertaining stories. Me and you both, I love Sarah J. Maas. I
Oh,
love
yes.
entertaining stories, but I really really like inspiring stories. I really like stories where the odds were stacked against them and
Yeah.
they overcame. Because I
Yeah.
think those stories help people.
Yeah.
But like you said earlier, stories are meant to, I think, evoke an emotion.
Yeah. What
And
is
and
the
I don't know. I
movie
hope that.
that just came out a couple years ago, and it's got the lady with the teaspoon, and it's oh my God.
Uh, where she sends them to the under.
Yeah, sort
Is
of.
you talking about where she hit?
It's
Oh,
the
I can't
psychological thriller
remember.
by oh God, that's gonna
I
drive me.
can't remember. But she taps the teacup and she
Yes.
hypnotizes a person,
Yes.
right?
I'm
And
trying to
then
figure it out right now
they
what
were
it's called.
harvesting. They were harvesting the parts,
Yep.
right, of
Mm-hmm.
African Americans.
Yep.
Yes, and auctioning them off to wealthy people.
Yes. I remember going to watch that from the perspective of a white person and seeing the white girl in there and how she would say stuff that I know I've said, but then hearing it on screen, I just wanted to be like, oh dear God. Oh God, I need to apologize to every single black person I know. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. What? Oh dear Lord. How color.
But you know what? You gotta move forward and just I think the goal is to change our behaviors
Oh, absolutely.
and not say those
But
things again.
sitting
And
there
because
watching that
we
made
are brought up a certain
change.
way.
It completely changed how I respond to things now.
Yeah, but I think but remember, like we all grew up in certain areas
Oh yeah.
where things were the norm.
Oh
It
yeah.
would have been the norm. Especially in the South. It would have been the norm.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so, you know what I mean? Give yourself some grace. And once we realize
Yeah.
something is not cool,
Well,
like
and
I watched Archie Bunker and the Jeffersons, and I was like, the
oh
stuff that they would say, I was like, oh my goodness,
yes.
like, and that people would laugh at, but they were
Yes.
ahead of their time too.
Yes.
I'm like,
And
yeah,
okay, so I'm white and I grew up in a very small southern town.
no,
N-word was
you are not
dropped
white, really.
like all the time. Shut up. The N-word was dropped with regularity as a normal dialogue phrase, right? And
Yes, yes,
I thought that was normal. That's just how people talked.
of
That was,
course,
and then I get
yes.
out to college and I had several of my black friends go, "Are you crazy? You can't talk like that." And I went, you know,
No,
and I actually had one friend go, "Bitch, I got to talk to you because we can't be friends with you if you don't like fix your mouth."
chill
And
out,
it
chill
gave
out.
me the opportunity to go, haha, oh, okay. So then movies like I'm trying to Selma and movies like Fruitville Station and The Butler and 42 and 12 Years a Slave. Watching those movies had me going, I didn't know any of these stories. It's like I didn't find out about Tulsa, Oklahoma till I was after college, like in my 30s. And I'm sitting here going,
Right.
what now? How? What?
Okay, but I didn't read about Black history till I went to college.
That's what I'm saying.
Because
Books
one of the things,
allow you to
but
find out
one
stuff
of
that you are not taught and you should be taught.
the okay, but wait, what I had been taught, what I had learned over time was the people with the power get to write the story.
Yeah,
They get to write the history, and so the people with the power made history the way they wanted it.
right.
And so when I went to college, it was a requirement
Hmm.
that we read Black history. We reread American history and we read African American history, and we compare those two histories together.
Yeah.
And
That's
some
not
of the
how we were
things that
taught.
I saw, but I didn't. But think about it. I didn't see it until I got to college. I was
Which
like
is,
18.
yeah,
You know what I mean? But I also went to a historically Black college. But
yeah.
I was glad I had the opportunity to read the stories because I see history repeating itself. Because I don't know if you read it, but it was like 2% of the country, 2% of Americans were in the what we would have considered rich back then.
Okay.
They were able to keep slavery going because they had convinced poor people that it was better for us to have slavery than
What?
to free African Americans.
No.
Because what they played on is fear. They played on the fear of people thinking someone was going to have something they didn't, like somebody was taking something from them. And don't we see that? We're still seeing it happen today. We're saying you need to be afraid that these people are going to take your job. We're still perpetuating that type of fear, even today. So that's why I love history and I love reading about history, because it ultimately repeats itself if we don't learn from our mistakes. We're
Right.
still doing it today. We're still telling people, hey, if you hold these people back, you can get ahead.
Yeah.
That is the craziest thing to me, to tell someone to not allow someone else to have something that you really not even don't care about, you really don't want, but you want to keep them anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm all about books. I'm all about history and learning,
Yeah.
because I want to learn from the mistakes we've made. But it looks like we're still making the same mistakes. Like we haven't learned from what we've already done.
One of the most
So
amazing lines that I've ever read in my entire life was, and again, I didn't know that this had happened until the movie came out, and it made me want to go back and read the book. And the cool thing about the book is it actually includes the actual trial transcript, and it's the trial of the, what is it, the Chicago Eight. And Abby
yeah,
Hoffman was one of the guys that was on trial, and it was what happened at this rally. And so the government decided to make this one group of people um the poster for the revolution, like civil rights revolution, right? And so they tried them all. And there was one guy from like the Young Republicans Association or something like that. And you've got Abby Hoffman, you've got a guy from the Black Panthers and a couple other people. And I remember in the movie, they were trying to figure out who was going to be the voice of reason from their side and get up and talk
yeah,
about what happened. And, you know, Abby Hoffman was notoriously loud and rude and foul-mouthed and in your face. And, you know, just like he was not the person that you would have thought would have been on the stand defending what their actions were. You know, you thought it would have, you know, the way the movie was getting ready to go, you would have thought it would have been the nice, clean-cut white kid who actually ended up being the worst person that you could have put on the stand. So, shit, you know, Abby Hoffman gets up there, and the prosecutor's talking to him, and he says something, and Abby Hoffman says, "I don't know, I've never had to defend my thoughts before." And I just remember sitting there watching that, going, "Oh." That's a really, oh, shit. And I had to pause
but
the movie for a minute
that's
and think about it.
that's probably why people get so up in arms.
Like, because occasionally, I mean, have you ever read something that you read it and then you just have to sit there and be like, well, damn, that's a really valid point.
Yes,
Damn.
I can't
Okay.
remember. I always have trouble pronouncing the series. It's one of your local authors, and it reminds me of a Star Trek, Star Warsy kind of um a Star Wars.
Oh,
She's
I
a
know which one you're
sci-fi. She's
talking
a
about.
sci-fi writer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I know it. I can see it. Contact mentioned it. Um,
Yes. And
Against
she.
all things being truth, the easiest, or oh God, that's gonna drive me crazy now. Give
Yeah.
me a
It's
minute and I'll find it.
Laura Brewer. It's
Yeah,
Laura Brewer. The songs of Tala. Is it Talamana?
yeah, 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 yeah,
And I she actually wrote something in there that I actually ended up highlighting because I said, man, that's how I see my world. Because I think the character felt his his people weren't seen.
yeah,
And it was like I was like, wow. And he was just trying to find a place where he fit. And I was like, wow.
yeah.
What did she say?
I know
Um,
exactly what you're talking about, and I cannot come up with it's this something theory.
and like, and she said, and because the character says, while hope lives, all ways are not closed, though it may appear otherwise.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I'm like, as long as there's hope, then there's a way. Then we can
yeah,
figure out something. But when you give up, when hope is lost, then that's when depression and sadness, because you feel like there's no way out.
yeah,
And so I was like,
yeah,
okay, I like where she put that in there, because it was like, for me, it was like, just never lose hope. Because I think as long as you have that,
yeah,
you
yeah.
can push off depression, and you can, you know what I mean?
Oh
And
yeah,
so I think just the power of books, and I think I hope that writers understand the power that they have, and that they use it accordingly. You know what I mean? Like, that's
yeah,
a lot of power. For
yeah,
you to feel like you're understood, and that you could explain to your husband how you felt, does
yeah.
that writer know the impact that they have on their readers? You know
I
what I mean?
really
Because I think
wish
if
that
you
I could tell
understand
John
that,
Green thank you. I really do. Because
right? Because I would tell Judy Bloom, hey, you were on the right track. I needed those stories when I was younger. Um, there's another great. She writes as if she's a third grader. She is one of the best children's writers. It's ones that my girls read when they were younger, and she always wrote like a third grader would write, or a fourth grader would write. And I wish I
yeah,
could tell them how amazing they are. I don't know that we tell authors
yeah.
that how much their writing means.
I will tell you,
But
so it makes me laugh. So Dan Adam, who is a very good friend of mine who I just love so much. He pokes fun at me a whole lot because my reaction to reading is so like, oh my God! And holy
yes,
dude! And it's not a normal reaction, and I'm very aware of that. I get like hyper, 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 super excited about stuff, right? And just
right.
absolutely unhinged in my holy shit, this is amazing. And I would text him stuff, and he would just be like, oh my God, okay, and he kind of made fun of me a little bit about it, which is totally fine. I mean, it's totally fine. I'm very aware that I'm a dork and a complete spaz when it comes to, that. So I get it. So in book three, he has this character who meets her idol. And the whole reason that she like got into science and all this kind of stuff, right? And she meets him and she's shaking his hand vigorously and it was one run-on sentence of, "Oh my God, I love your work. And when you said this, I was totally love that. And you're the reason I got into science and blah, 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 blah." And the whole time she's vigorously shaking his hand, right? And the guy is just
Yeah.
looking at her with this amusement of, "Oh my God, you're just okay." And then her boss finally goes, "Stop shaking, let go of his hand." And she goes, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm just really excited to meet." And I busted out laughing because I knew that that was me, that Dan was saying that and describing that exact moment because he knows that if I ever met one of my favorite authors, I would just, "Oh my God, you're my favorite author, and I've read all your books, and I have this tattoo." And I totally giggled because he completely made that about me. And I knew, and I called him, I said, "I know what you
Oh,
did. You're a dick." And he laughed and he was like, "You're welcome." He was like, "Yeah, that is
but that is
exactly."
still that's an that's an honor, Lindsay. That's an honor to be that character, and you
Yes.
know it's you.
Yes. I knew
That's
it
an
was me
honor
the
that
minute
he
I read it. I
appreciates
sat there and was like, "That asshole."
that. That's because he loves you, though.
I know. And I love him too.
That's
But you got to be careful about writers because if they find something amusing or funny, they're going to put it in a book, you know.
yeah.
And
That's
I
why I
just,
like because I think Rose uh always adds a little bit of fun to her book.
oh, yeah, for sure. Well, and the thing is,
Yeah,
too,
her
that
characters.
I think it's so funny. So, like, okay, I have to explain why this is funny. If you've ever seen Silence of the Lambs, you know the line, "It
Yes.
puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again," right? Okay. So
Yes.
in the book, Julie and Julia, okay? That book is a true story about this woman who decided to spend a year cooking every single recipe in Julia Child's The Art of French Cooking, okay? So
Ooh.
there's this scene in the book that made me laugh till I cried and damn near peed on myself. I laughed so hard that I could not read for about 15 minutes because I was cackling. So the scene is she has to take this cow bone and chop it open in half so that she can dig out the bone marrow, okay, for this one recipe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it's a bloody mess, okay? And so she's got this apron on, and it's got blood all over her, and she's got this just gross, like meat fleshed cow bone that she's opened, and she's scraping out all the pulp from, the marrow and stuff. And her hands are covered in blood.
Yeah.
So she walks in to her husband who's sitting here waiting on this meal that's taking forever because she's having to crack open a cow bone, which is not an easy task. And she walks into her husband and goes, "Look, it puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again." And her husband just rolls her
Oh,
eyes. And when I tell you that I busted out laughing, I laughed so hard I had to lay down because I could not breathe because I knew exactly what she was referencing. And I knew and I tried to explain it to my husband, and he was just like, "Okay." I'm telling you, and every time I read that book, that scene just sets me off. It is so freaking
that
funny.
cracks you up.
Yes, because that's one of my favorite movies. And then to have somebody else get it and reference it in another book that I also really love in such an appropriate, hilarious manner was just, this is why I love books. This is freaking hilarious. It's so
But you
stupid.
like people who watch movies and read books would have been the only people to get the reference.
Oh God. And it's just so funny, like when somebody's in on the joke and you get it in a book,
Yes.
like, like
Right.
American Psycho. I read the book. It's about 80s consumerism, right? And so I went
Mhm.
into the movie because I wanted to go see it, and I giggled and laughed through the entire movie, even though the movie, it just looks like he's a psychotic murderer. But if you read the book, it's a whole different kind of perspective. So the looks that I was getting in the movie theater because I was cackling at like his whole montage about killing Jared Leto's character while I was listening to Huey Lewis in the news talking about how this album is better than their first album and blah 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 blah. I was dying, but only because I read the book. And you talk to anybody else,
Right.
if you haven't read the book, you miss the humor in all of that. If you're just watching the movie,
Right. And
it's
so
like a
that's
bloody
why
psycho. But the book is hilarious
people were looking at you at this show because they hadn't read.
because I
They
hadn't
were
read the book.
like,
But
what?
it's just, and like
Right.
Fight Club is the other thing. I read Fight Club and then went and watched the movie knowing what was coming, and I am just dying laughing because it was funny to me. And I totally got the point of what he was trying to say about that movie, getting dirty looks. I'm like, y'all have got to start reading, for Christ's sakes. Read a book. And everybody's like, the movie's better. When? When's the movie better? You miss all the nuances. I will even say Twilight is the same way. Because if you read Twilight, and it is crap, don't get me wrong, I love them, but I go into there knowing they are not Pulitzer Prize winning books. They are fluffy crap, and I love them. But in the first book, all the little special moments between Bella and Edward that cultivate their relationship by the end of the book, the movie just glosses right over. So their relationship in the movie, it makes no damn sense how they got where they got. And it's like, okay, you're missing all of these little, simple, intimate, quiet moments between these two people that you are missing, and it is not explaining their love story correctly at all. You know why? Because you
Girl,
didn't read
everybody,
the book. So
but everybody doesn't like reading, Lindsay. Everybody
I
doesn't like reading.
know.
You know what I mean? Because some people struggle with it.
Oh, I get that.
And maybe that's
Totally.
why they don't like it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I
Because my
also,
friend,
and
he
I've
was
said this
dyslexic.
before, I think that reading in schools is treated like it's a chore, not a gift. And it should be treated like a gift. It should be treated as a not, okay, you've got to read this book this week and then we're going to discuss it and you have a test. No, no, To Kill a Mockingbird. Instead of, hey, we have to read this book by Harper Lee. It's a really great book. It's about Atticus Finch and racism. Who the hell wants to read that? Let's hey y'all, we're gonna read this book about this small southern town and this amazingly articulate man who's a lawyer and he's raging against the injustice of this other man. And while he's doing that, he's teaching his children about what's right and wrong in the face of all these other people telling him not to do it, and he does it anyway, and it's fantastic and it's beautiful, and you've got all these interesting characters, and this is going to be awesome. Which book are you going to want to read?
Yeah, but I think also the person picking the book knows why they're picking it.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe it's about what the person is interested in. That's why I'm glad like the library will tell you topics. So
Yeah.
if you want to read about death or grief, or if you want to read about challenges or whatever, you kind of know
Yeah.
what you're getting into. And I think if children get topics that interest them, then you can probably get a lifelong reader. But if you're forcing them to read a book that they don't even understand, like, when I was younger, yeah, we had to read like Huckleberry Finn and all of that stuff, but that wasn't a life that I understood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like we tried to get Nicole to like reading by giving her things she understood. So some of the books I think you named, we might have had her read when she was younger because it was the life she understood. It was more urban. It was African American character. So I think maybe we can help children develop a love of reading by one, reading to them, and then two, giving them things that they're interested in, giving them stories that they find interesting, and then hopefully they'll develop their taste.
Yeah.
And want to read. Like Sydney's an avid reader. She reads But she loves horror. I don't know where she got that
I
from.
love
Horror scares me to death.
Sydney because Sydney and I will read the same book and she will find shit that I'm like, I don't remember reading that. And I'll go back to like, I totally glossed right over that. Damn, Sydney. And I just
That's
want
that's
to read like Sydney reads because
yeah.
she
She
finds
loves
stuff.
reading. She loves the details. Like every book, she lets me borrow a book that she has. And
Mm,
in every book, she's written notes.
yeah.
All of her books have notes.
Mm,
And she's like little details, like you said, that me and you wouldn't even think about.
nope. She makes me
Sydney
such a
catches
better
it and she
reader.
highlights it.
Mm. She has made
She
me
is an
such a
actress. Like
better
she
reader
loves reading,
because
but
it's
she
just
also
like, I didn't read that. I didn't get that part. That's a really good point. Damn it, Sydney. And I always tell him, like, damn it, Sydney, now I gotta go back and reread the book. And she'll just kind of laugh.
yes, and she's also a writer, and so for
Mm.
her the details are important. So she's
I can't
always
wait to read
looking
her
at
book.
what
Oh,
the
God.
writer, like the plot and all
Yeah.
of that, like
Yeah.
little nuances, because for sometimes the writer is giving you a clue
Mm.
to what's going to happen in this book or another book. Like she's looking at Sarah J. Maas. She said, there's still a lot of loose ends on her last book. So she's
Mm.
got to be coming up. She's got to be writing another book. And
Oh,
I'm
she
like,
is.
how do
Yeah.
you get that? You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah.
he remembers some of the things that we might not.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So yeah, right.
Well, Leah, thank you so
Yeah.
much for spending time with me today. We're about out of time. I appreciate you so much, and I love talking with you. It's one of the reasons we're friends because you and I always just have such interesting conversations, especially when it comes to books. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you guys
Just
so much for
life.
tuning in. I know, right? Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Spine Bookcast, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. And we only have a couple more episodes coming up before the end of season one, and I got a big surprise for season finale. Y'all are just gonna love it. So, y'all have a great day and happy reading. Thank you for tuning in and listening.